Trump's plan to end the war in Ukraine the real strategy behind the bold claims? For months, Donald Trump has confidently declared that he could end the war in Ukraine in just 24 hours. It's a claim that has sparked curiosity, skepticism, and debate. But now, as the war evolves in ways few predicted, the real question remains: how exactly does Trump plan to achieve this? Is there a concrete strategy behind his words, or is this just another case of political bravado? While many expected Trump to push for a peace deal that favors Russia, recent developments suggest his plan might be far more complex and calculated. His approach doesn't seem to be about diplomatic negotiations alone. It's about leverage. Military aid, economic power, and global trade dynamics are at the center of what could be one of the biggest geopolitical power plays in modern history. At the same time, the war is taking a dramatic turn. Ukraine is no longer just playing defense, it's striking deep inside Russian territory. In recent months, Ukrainian drones have relentlessly targeted Russia's vital oil infrastructure, hitting refineries and fuel depots. These attacks are not just symbolic gestures, they are designed to cripple Russia's war economy, limiting its ability to fuel tanks, jets, and supply chains. With every successful strike, Ukraine is escalating its economic war against Russia, pushing Putin further into a corner. Meanwhile, Russia's battlefield losses continue to mount. Over 10,000 tanks have been destroyed since the invasion began, and Moscow is increasingly reliant on outdated Soviet-era weaponry. Despite these devastating setbacks, Putin isn't backing down. Instead, he's absorbing massive losses and doubling down on new offensives. Against this backdrop, Trump's approach to resolving the war is emerging as a high-stakes geopolitical gamble. Recent reports suggest that he's considering an unprecedented trade deal, offering continued U.S. military support to Ukraine in exchange for access to Ukraine's vast reserves of rare earth metals. These minerals are critical for advanced technologies, including AI, military systems, and clean energy. If this deal were to happen, it could shift the balance of economic power away from China, which currently dominates the rare earth metals market. But here's the big question: would Ukraine agree to such a deal? And what happens if Russia and China decide to retaliate? One thing is clear: this war is no longer just about territorial control. It has become a global power struggle, where economics, energy, and military technology are just as crucial as battlefield victories. If Trump is serious about ending the war, it won't be through traditional diplomacy. His strategy hinges on economic leverage, strategic alliances, and major geopolitical shifts. So is his plan realistic, or is it just another bold claim with no real execution behind it? Today, we're diving deep into Trump's actual strategy, Ukraine's evolving war tactics, and the global stakes behind the ongoing conflict. This isn't just about ending the war, it's about reshaping the future of international power. Let's break it all down. The war in Ukraine has now dragged on for more than 3 years, and while Russia once believed it could secure a quick and decisive victory, reality has proven to be much different. What was supposed to be a swift military operation has turned into a prolonged and costly quagmire, revealing serious weaknesses in Russia's military strategy and proving the resilience of Ukraine's defense forces. From day one, Russia's entire war strategy revolved around the idea of overwhelming force, massing thousands of tanks, artillery units, and troops in an effort to crush Ukrainian resistance. But now, the numbers tell a completely different story. Since 2022, Russia has lost an estimated 10,000 tanks and 77 heavy flamethrower systems, an astonishing level of destruction. So how did this happen? How did a country with one of the world's largest armored forces find itself constantly losing ground to Ukrainian defenders? The answer lies in Ukraine's evolving military tactics and Russia's own strategic failures. Ukrainian forces have relied on precision weaponry, modern anti-tank missiles, and highly coordinated artillery strikes to systematically dismantle Russian armored units. Javelin and NLAW missiles have allowed small infantry teams to destroy Russian tanks with pinpoint accuracy, while HIMARS and long-range artillery have further crippled Russia's ability to maintain frontline advances. But the biggest game-changer has been drone warfare. Ukraine has embraced unmanned aerial systems in ways no military has before. Kamikaze drones, attack UAVs, and long-range aerial strikes have become a nightmare for Russian forces. These drones are not just targeting troops and tanks, they are striking Russian supply lines, command centers, and even military bases deep inside Russian territory. And now, Ukraine is taking the war to Russia's economy. Recent months have seen a surge in Ukrainian drone strikes targeting Russia's critical oil infrastructure. Oil refineries, fuel depots, and pipelines inside Russia are being systematically destroyed. The strategy is clear. Ukraine is attacking the financial backbone of Russia's war machine. Without oil revenues, Russia can't sustain its military efforts. For Putin, the consequences are devastating. Every destroyed refinery, every tank lost, every supply line cut weakens his grip on the war. But despite these massive setbacks, Moscow isn't changing its tactics. Instead, it continues throwing outdated tanks and undertrained soldiers onto the battlefield, hoping sheer numbers will be enough. This quantity over quality approach has been disastrous. Reports suggest Russia's best-trained tank crews were lost early in the war, leaving inexperienced recruits to replace them. The result? Even more catastrophic battlefield losses. And yet, Putin refuses to retreat. He's gambling that Russia's economy can survive longer than Ukraine's Western-backed military support. But now, Trump is stepping into the picture, claiming he can end the war in just 24 hours. But is that even possible? Or is there a much bigger game at play? Let's break it down. The war in Ukraine isn't just about tanks and soldiers anymore. It's about economic survival, global influence, and strategic leverage. As Ukraine escalates drone attacks on Russian oil facilities, and Russia struggles to maintain its military capabilities, the war is shifting into uncharted territory. But while missiles and drones dominate the battlefield, another battle is being fought behind closed doors, a battle of negotiation, resources, and power politics. And this is where Donald Trump steps in. For years, Trump has touted himself as a master dealmaker, someone who can negotiate better deals than anyone else. During his presidency, he questioned U.S. military aid to foreign nations, criticized NATO for not paying its fair share, and repeatedly claimed that he could solve global conflicts through sheer negotiation. Now, as he positions himself for a potential return to the White House, Trump is making one of his boldest promises yet: to end the Russia-Ukraine war in just 24 hours. But let's be real, there's no magic wand that can make this war disappear overnight. So what's Trump's actual plan? Here's where things get really interesting. Trump isn't just talking about peace, he's talking about resources. Recent reports suggest that he's considering a deal that would offer continued U.S. military support to Ukraine, but at a price. And that price? Ukraine's rare earth metals. This might not seem like a big deal at first, but rare earth metals are the backbone of modern technology. These minerals are essential for everything, from advanced military systems and AI to electric vehicles, semiconductors, and clean energy. And here's the problem. China currently dominates over 60% of the world's rare earth metal production. For years, the US has been looking for ways to cut its dependence on China when it comes to these critical materials. And guess who has one of the world's richest deposits of rare earth metals? Ukraine. If Trump manages to secure a deal with Ukraine, giving the US access to its massive rare earth reserves, it would reshape global economic power overnight. The US would no longer be dependent on China for these crucial materials. Russia would lose leverage over Ukraine's resource wealth. China's economic dominance in the rare earth market would take a serious hit. But here's the catch. This isn't just about the US and Ukraine. If Ukraine accepts Trump's deal, it could send shockwaves through global markets, straining US-China relations, disrupting NATO's current military support, and potentially pushing Russia to escalate its war effort even further. Meanwhile, Putin is watching closely. If the US moves in to control Ukraine's rare earth reserves, it wouldn't just be a military loss for Russia, it would be an economic disaster. Not only would Russia's war economy be under attack from Ukrainian drone strikes, but its entire economic future could be threatened if China loses its grip on rare earth supply chains. And that brings us to a critical question. Is Trump's plan actually about peace, or is it about securing one of the most valuable economic deals of the decade? Because if this deal happens, it won't just reshape the war in Ukraine, it could shift the balance of power between the US, Russia, and China for years to come. But before Trump can even think about pulling off a deal like this, there's one major obstacle standing in his way. And that's NATO. As Trump builds his vision for ending the war in Ukraine, there's one huge factor that could make or break his strategy: NATO. For decades, NATO has been America's strongest military alliance. But Trump has never been a fan. He has repeatedly called NATO a bad deal for the US, questioning why America should continue to foot the bill while European nations contribute far less. And now, if Trump returns to office, there's a very real possibility that he could dramatically scale back US support for NATO. So here's the big question. If Trump pulls back US support, what happens to Ukraine? Right now, NATO is the backbone of Ukraine's military support. Billions of dollars in weapons, intelligence, and logistical aid have come from the alliance, largely driven by the US. If Trump weakens US involvement in NATO, it could force Europe to take more responsibility for supporting Ukraine. Countries like Germany, France, and the UK might have to step up their military aid efforts, which some have already begun preparing for. But if Trump pressures NATO to back off, Ukraine could suddenly find itself without the same level of military aid, forcing it to negotiate with Russia on Putin's terms. And here's the thing. Putin knows this. He's betting that Western support for Ukraine will eventually weaken. If Trump starts pulling the US away from NATO, Russia could gain new strategic advantages, potentially forcing Ukraine into a settlement that favors Moscow. At the same time, NATO's continued involvement in Ukraine presents a serious political dilemma for Trump. If he continues military aid, he risks alienating his political base, many of whom believe the US should focus on domestic issues instead of foreign wars. If he cuts military support, he risks allowing Russia to make significant gains, potentially leading to a much larger global conflict. And then there's the wild card: China. If Trump secures Ukraine's rare earth metals, it would severely weaken China's grip on the global tech industry, something Beijing would not take lightly. This could trigger an entirely new economic conflict between the US and China, shifting the focus away from Russia and toward a broader geopolitical power struggle. So where does that leave Ukraine? Despite its battlefield successes, Ukraine's ability to win this war still depends on Western support. If Trump cuts military aid, Ukraine's ability to defend itself could collapse. If NATO loses cohesion, Russia might gain new strategic advantages. And if Ukraine is forced into economic negotiations over rare earth resources, it could find itself trading its long-term wealth for immediate survival. At this point, Trump's so-called peace plan is shaping up to be far less about ending the war overnight, and more about reshaping global power dynamics. If he does negotiate a settlement, it won't be a simple handshake deal. It will be a high-stakes arrangement involving military aid, economic influence, and a potential shift in NATO's power structure. So what do you think? Is Trump's plan a masterstroke of negotiation that could actually bring peace? Or is this a geopolitical gamble that could have unintended consequences for the entire world? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about how Trump's peace plan could reshape global power, check out our next video. Thanks for watching.